All right, thank you. Another applause for Ruben Barrales from Wells Fargo. All right, let's see. Good, they are on cue. By the way, please thank the AV team behind me. They are working tirelessly to make sure that everything goes smoothly here. So this first session is a session that I actually teach personally because of the fact that we've learned over the years not to make assumptions that we all fully understand strategic board service. By a show of hands, how many of you in this room already serve on a non-for-profit board of directors? Okay, that's less than half in the room. So let me tell you why this, and now it even reinforces why we need to have topics like this. Because we're going to be talking about corporate boards, corporate advisory boards, a lot of executive level topics, but the one area that often we find is a hurdle is understanding how to be strategic about your board service. And this is a topic that everybody here needs to know. I would love to see that within a year, every single one of you that are in this room are serving on some non-for-profit board. And if you haven't served on one before and you're looking for resources, there are a lot of great resources that can teach you about the ins and outs of a non-for-profit board, Robert's Rules of Order, nonprofit structure, all those things. That's not what this is going to be about. It's not about how to serve on a nonprofit or the ins and outs. I'm not the CEO of the Nonprofit Association of America trying to advocate on this, even though we all need to make sure that we're advocating. This topic is how to be strategic about your nonprofit board service to elevate your executive credibility that will eventually help you not only internally at your companies, but also externally as you think about a higher board service that may even lead to a future corporate board. Just a tad bit background about me and some of my knowledge on this. I've been serving on corporate and corporate advisory boards for almost 16, 17 years. I've served on a number of very prominent nonprofit boards, most of whom that you know. I'm on the board of directors of Junior Achievement USA. Everyone knows Junior Achievement. I'm on that board. I serve on the board of directors of the USA Expo 2027 board. In fact, after I'm done here tomorrow, I'm racing on a red-eye flight to Washington, D.C. to be with Secretary of State Antony Blinken, because the week after, we'll be announcing which country will get the 2027 World Expo. We're hoping that it'll come to US, and if it is, I know Target if you're here, if it is, it'll go to Minnesota. So let's hope to see where that happens. But I'm on that board of directors. I'm on the Latino Justice board of directors as well. I serve on the advisory board for the Ohio State University, and my alma mater, go Buckeyes, please. Sorry if you're a Wolverine from Michigan, but I share all of these, and by the way, I've now served on two commissions from two presidents of the United States. I was appointed by President Obama to the National Museum of American Latino Commission. We all know we're looking to get our first Latino museum on the board of directors on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. And I was just named to the President's Advisory Commission on advancing educational excellence, equity, and economic opportunities for Hispanics. And and I won't name off all the corporate boards because it's actually very numerous, but I share all of this because there are some common denominators of what all of you can do as you're thinking about not only your nonprofit board service, but how that can support you internally with your advancement, but also how you think about future prominent nonprofit boards, and then possibly more corporate boards. When I gave an interview this morning to the New York Times, we were sharing what just one of the big concerns are. One of the things that we know is that there are not enough Latinos that are serving on corporate boards. We know that the number has been hovering at around 5% or so for the last couple of years. For Latinas, it's only been about 1%. There's only one Latina that is a Fortune 500 CEO, Priscilla Montalvan, the CEO for Fannie Mae. And we're just looking at all these common challenges. So this session is how you can be strategic about your choice of nonprofits and how we can support you. So let's first talk about something that I want to make sure everyone understands. Qualifications versus sponsorship versus credibility. So, and by the way, if you can't see in the back, that's okay. I'll make sure that everyone reads it. So it's your qualifications that get you the job, early career, mid-level jobs, or even the promotion. That happens based on your qualifications. But when you're talking about the C-suite, it's about your sponsorship. Who is sponsoring you into the higher and more senior level positions? It starts shifting away from qualification alone to your sponsorship. And we've talked about this, and you'll probably hear more about sponsorship throughout these next 2 days. However, it's your connections and your credibility that is going to get you a board seat, whether it's a corporate board or a prominent nonprofit board. The big misconception is that getting on a board is about just your qualifications, your resume. And the answer is, that's what you do when you're looking to hire someone. But it's your credibility that will get you on boards. So nonprofits, when you're planning strategically, can strengthen your external professional credibility. As I shared, in addition to my work as a CEO, when you name off these boards, it gives you an idea of my own credibility and many others that will be on stage. So these are very important. So we're going to think strategically about nonprofit board service as part of your overall executive strategy and long-term success trajectory. But what is credibility? If getting on a board is about your credibility, what defines credibility? So your board journey, whether it's corporate or prominent nonprofit, and for many of you, it may be nonprofits. For some of you, you may be ready for that possible corporate board or maybe that first corporate board. And so it's going to be a function of three variables. Now, I'm not talking about credibility like financial credibility or other credibilities. This is about board credibility. It's a function of your achievements. What have you accomplished that gives you a credibility? What are the things that you've done, your achievements? The time. How long have you been achieving in the areas that'll strengthen your credibility? Because if it's one thing if you've been achieving for a year versus if you've been achieving for 30 years, a big difference in terms of how time makes that difference. But then here's one thing that and I share this third one because I hope this one is really an eye-opener, because I know that in my Dominican family, where I grew up in Washington Heights and raised in New Jersey, I was taught by my family, lay low, just stay below the radar, just let your work speak for itself. Don't boast about what you're doing. But here's the thing, is that the third one, which is very key, is your visibility. How well known are you in the areas that define your credibility by those who can vouch for you? In other words, it's not just who you know, it's who knows you. And that requires you to be able to be visible about your achievements and doing it over time. I can give example after example of individuals that have approached me and says, I'm a senior vice president, even an executive vice president, and I've been doing all these things over time. And I said, great, did you tell your CEO then? No, because, I don't feel like I want to boast. And I said, well, guess what just happened? If you turn this into an equation, achievements multiplied by time, multiplied by visibility equals credibility. Let's say you've been achieving. Let's say you've been doing it over a long period of time, but you've been silent about your own successes. We got a lot of mathematicians in here. What is anything times zero? Zero. Anything, 1 million, 10 million, 10 trillion, 10 quadrillion times zero is zero. And remember, getting on a board is about your credibility. So in order to strengthen that credibility variable, you have to be visible. You should be sharing about what you're doing on social media. You should be sharing about what you're accomplishing to your higher-ups. You should let your as many people know what you're doing, because as they see that, and as they see those achievements, and as they see that over time, then you start seeing that credibility component to make a difference there. So I want to make sure we understand that component, because this way you start thinking the mindset is not just skill set alone. It's your credibility, your achievement multiplied by time, multiplied by visibility. You should make sure you memorize that. Achievement multiplied by time, multiplied by visibility equals credibility. So what's the benefits of planning strategically for nonprofit board service? Well, it magnifies your professional development with the possibility that your company may actually sponsor you to serve on boards. Many of your companies already do that, and this is something that that supports you internally, because your company is aware that you are serving on these non-for-profit boards that are aligning with your company's visibility of you as you're serving on these boards. It expands and increases your external and internal network, especially with higher ranking leaders at your company. Because if you're serving on some of these large boards, there's a very good chance that someone that's very, very higher up is going to start noticing your non-for-profit board service, and it will get that attention. It exposes you to other nonprofit board directors, and I should probably underline this, who also serve on other corporate boards or other prominent nonprofit boards. Because why? Because if they see your credibility on this board, and they happen to serve on that board, and they're at the term off that board, and they're looking for a recommendation, who do you think they're going to go to first? They're going to go to who they view as someone that is credible. And when they see you serving on one board together, then there's a good chance that they'll either refer you or possibly even nominate you for others and maybe other higher up board of directors. And it can lead to recommendations for future high-profile nonprofit appointments, civic appointments, even promotions within your company, because you're now becoming much more ambassadorial externally on behalf of your company. Because when you look at the board, when you go to any nonprofit board and they list off the board directors, what do they list? Your name and your company. And that's not an accident. It happens, that is the standard on nonprofits. They name you and they name your company. And so those are things that's very important to understand when you're thinking about that. So how strategic nonprofit board can support your actual internal career? Well, again, as I shared, your employer may sponsor you to serve on a non-for-profit. Sometimes, and this happens too, sometimes your company may ask you to serve on a nonprofit because the company already has an existing relationship and they're looking to develop you, so they might tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, we support American Heart Association, March of Dimes, American Cancer Society, whatever that board may be. There might be even boards that are within your industry associations, and they may tap you to serve on those boards. And so that's not an accident. That's part of an internal career opportunity advancement. And as I shared, it promotes you as an ambassador for the company, thus increasing your network credibility internally within your company, as well as not just beyond with your direct report, but beyond your direct report. So for many of you, because we get this a lot, how do I get access to the higher-ups within my company if I can't go beyond my direct report? Well, this is one of the ways of doing that, because you're going to get far more visibility as you become an ambassador for your company. And as you move up the corporate ladder, companies may also move you up a parallel ladder on a board and serve on board service and sponsorship, thus allowing you to continue to move up. So in other words, what this means is that, let's say you started as an associate, and then you're on a local nonprofit, but then you move up to a manager, and then you might start serving on some maybe regional boards. Then you might become a director, and then you're on some larger boards. Then you might be a senior director, and then a vice president, a senior vice president, executive vice president. But the key thing is, as you're moving up that ladder, externally, your company is likely going to support you serving on a larger board. A good example, for example, many of these organizations that have like a local affiliates, whether it's Girl Scouts or Boys and Girls Club or the American Heart Association, or so many of these organizations, the National Urban League, and so many different organizations that have local, and as you're moving up, that's the key thing. As you're moving up your ladder internally, you want to make sure you're thinking about a parallel upward mobility on your nonprofit boards. And then companies recognize that their employees' ambassadorship strengthens retention and longevity at the company. So in other words, your companies want you serving on nonprofit boards because it actually helps the company in terms of your retention and upward promotion. So it is a win. So here's the things to ask, and I never, ever join a board without asking these questions before you join on any board. One, who else is on the board of directors? If you're being asked to serve on a board, you should be looking to see who else is on that board. Because guess what? Your credibility is a function of who else is going to give you that credibility on that board. So if there are high-ranking leaders already on that board, then you want to be on a board like that. But if you're looking at that board and most of them are in roles that may be junior to you, then guess what? You may have just tapped out your own credibility because there's no one else there that's in a higher position that can vouch for you for a higher board because they're not at your level. So you want to know who else is on the board. Is there a history of that nonprofit attracting highly credible board directors? As I remember, credibility, achievement, multiplied by time, multiplied by visibility equals your credibility. Does that nonprofit have a history? And so are there any connection between you and any of the board members or any board members' employers? So these are the things you want to think about. Is there a vetting process? Did they vet you for a board service? That's very key because it tells you that there's a process. And then if you are serving or planning on serving on multiple boards, are the missions diverse? Are the demographics diverse? Are the board committee assignments diverse? As I shared, as I was naming all my boards, the one thing you saw in common was nothing. And that's the key, because that means that your network is expanding. If you're on multiple boards and they have a lot in common, then that might make it more comfortable and convenient, but it's not expanding your credibility. You want your boards, if you serve on multiple boards, to be as different as possible so that way you're able to expand your own credibility. So here's a slide that I actually love sharing, especially when I'm meeting with those that are ready for serving on corporate boards. Nonprofits with a history of producing future corporate board directors. Because if you're thinking about down the road in your career that you want to serve on a future corporate board, then this is going to be very important as you think strategically about your not-for-profits. At the very, very top, and forgive me for the low text, but I will read it, museum boards. Museum boards are hugely, hugely popular. I'm not from San Francisco, but if I were to go to the board of directors of the San Francisco Museum of Art, which I did not do, anyone wants to Google them, you're welcome to, I can almost bet my life savings that if you go to that board, you're going to see individuals who either currently serve on a corporate board or eventually will serve on a board. So every city, you can go to your local or, again, a prominent museum board. Those are very key. Foundation boards. Every city and region and country have foundation boards. They are very, very popular and attractive for producing future corporate board directors. Prominent health-related boards, hospital boards, again, American Heart Association, American Cancer Society, Alzheimer's Association, anything that is that's trying to address a major health cause or a hospital or a health institution is usually very attractive and has a common and is common for producing future corporate board directors. College boards, but I put especially private college boards. And the reason why we say especially private college boards is because most public universities, and again, I serve on the Ohio State University's Alumni Advisory Council, and that came from this, but if you look at most public college boards, there's a combination of a political appointment, and then sometimes there's an internal process there. But private college boards, they function like a large nonprofit institution. Every single board director is someone that is prominent to help support that private college. Prominent human service organizations, all names that you know: United Way, Boys and Girls Club, Habitat for Humanity, YMCA, YWCA, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, etc. I think you get the picture of examples of health of human service organizations, well-funded national nonprofits that promote a widely accepted cause. And I want to emphasize widely accepted. And you're going to see me emphasize this in my next slide. That's a widely accepted cause. Nature conservation, education, social reform, humanitarian aid, religious-based charities, diversity and inclusion. You get this. The key thing, if you don't remember any of this, and you remember anything, if you're like, I can't remember what he said in this slide, remember this. The key words is that whatever your choice for that nonprofit, it must have two key traits. If they don't have these two traits, this is not going to support your credibility. It must be well-funded and widely accepted. Well-funded and widely accepted. Once you understand that the board that you're thinking about strategically must be well-funded and widely accepted, you'll remember the rest of these bullet points, because you'll look for these, which, as you know, every nonprofit is required to show public filings, and you'll know these things. Well-funded and widely accepted. Once you understand that, then all this will come together very nicely. So understanding give-get. I get this a lot as well. So the average, again, a prominent board usually has a give-get. According to Board Assist, the average give-get for a typical well-funded and widely accepted board is about $5,000 per year, according to, to Board Assist. The give-get for many museum, hospital, or high-profile nonprofits, they can start at up to $25,000 per year. And for some really prominent nonprofits and museums, it could exceed $100,000 a year. If you're on the board of the Met in New York City, for example, it might be $250,000 a year. And if you look at their board, you can see how they're able to get a board like that. But here's one thing that you say, because, oh my God, you're like, that's a lot of money. I don't know if I can do that every single year. Well, here's the thing. You may be able to leverage your employer to have in-kind donations to count towards the give-get goal if the nonprofit counts in-kind support, which is very common. They'll say, hey, can you donate products or service or something else that might be viewed as in-kind, and they will file as if it's a cash contribution. So know your give-get potential and match it with possible nonprofit boards that can meet that annual give-get. So you should already have that strategy in place for give-gets. And so, and one thing that's important to know is most of your companies, and I think I got a slide on this, is that some of them will match you, some of them will even double match you if you're donating and volunteering as well. So you want to make sure you know that process. So what should you do before you get on a nonprofit? One, know that process. The process of getting nominated, identifying board directors who you may already have a connection to, and make your interests known to that person. I'd like to serve on that non-for-profit board. If you have no connections to anyone on the board, find a mutual connection who can help you with that introduction. In other words, finding someone that has the closer you can get that connection, the better. And have your give-get strategy in place before you begin your journey. What you don't want to do is, approach someone at the Met in New York City and say, "Hey, I want to join your board of directors," without knowing that they have a $250,000 give-get, and you're like, "I didn't know that," and then all of a sudden, now it looks like you may not be prepared. So, understand what can you do, and thinking about the strategy of how much can you get as a match? Because most of your companies, believe it or not, many of your foundations already offer matching contributions if you show documentation that you are supporting a non-for-profit. And if the nonprofit has an existing relationship with your company already, which happens a lot, then check to see if the company is willing to recommend you for the board. This is a common thing that sometimes companies will rotate certain employees that are on boards where there's already a direct relationship with their companies, and then find out who at that company is the point of contact for that non-for-profit. And if your company foundation has that matching gift program, use it to magnify that financial give-get strategy. So it might be that if you're able to donate, let's say $2,500, and your company matches it, you might get to that give-get. But there are some, and again, the average is $5,000. So there are some that might be lower, and some will ask for in-kind support. Now, what should you do after you get on there? Now you made it. You're on the nonprofit. What do I do? So one is know your board service outcome. What are you trying to accomplish by serving on that non-for-profit board? Know what it takes to succeed as a board director, because there may be other things that they may want you to do. They may want you to serve on committees. They may want you to do a certain level of volunteer time. They may ask you to ask your company to support you in some of the initiatives that they're doing. And so know how to add value and how to get noticed, and this is the key, how to get noticed by your fellow board directors. Again, this session is about strategic board service. Again, this is not Robert's Rules of Order and what's the executive committee, all that stuff. This is about you. Make sure how to succeed so that you can get noticed. And then get to know your fellow board members personally, especially those that serve on other boards, another corporate board or other prominent advisory boards, so that way you get to know them. Make sure they get to know you well, because as this happens, this increases your credibility because other people need to see what you're doing as you're accomplishing. And so these are the things that are really important. And then know your philanthropic and give-get strategy. Whether you're sponsored by your company or you are doing it through your own philanthropy, because you may decide to just do it all if it's a strategy that may not be aligned with your company, but it's aligned with your values, and you want to serve on that board and you want to make sure that you're participating. Know how to meet or exceed that give-get strategy. It is very, very important, because once you understand this, then it makes you start thinking, okay, as I get ready to head back to my regions of the country, I'm going to be looking at these boards that, again, well-funded, widely accepted, so that I can make sure that I'm enhancing my credibility, my achievements multiplied by time, multiplied by visibility, all these things which equal credibility. So you're seeing how this all comes together, because when we get to the next session after this one, where we have a session called A Look into the Boardroom, we know that this is where we would love to see many of you ultimately get to that role, but less than half of you raised your hands on serving on nonprofits. So that means that, we had a lot of work to do to get you on some nonprofit boards so that we can make sure that we're elevating your credibility. And that's why at HACER, we want to make sure that we're supporting you on that journey. And so, in conclusion, and I want to open up for questions, is that by planning for your nonprofit board service strategically, you can simultaneously support the nonprofit organization, because remember, you're there to support the nonprofit serving on their board and the mission that they're doing, while strengthening your external network credibility. And over time, your strengthened credibility could yield greater opportunities for higher profile nonprofit boards. By the way, I failed to mention that even though I'm on the board of directors of Junior Achievement USA, I live in New Jersey, and guess what board I'm on? Junior Achievement of New Jersey. So you can see how that's just common. So again, it's all these great organizations that you can serve on in your area, and as you're rising up, make sure that you're doing a parallel upward trajectory with your nonprofit board service. And again, as I shared, and I keep emphasizing this, achievement multiplied by time, multiplied by visibility equals your credibility. So that means don't go below the radar. Don't just let your work speak for you. You speak for your work. and make sure that you are sharing that. And you do it over time, and you continue to achieve as many of you are already doing. And when you do that, you're going to notice that before you know it, you won't necessarily be asking to serve on boards. They're going to eventually start coming to you. And so that's very key. And so remember that your connections and credibility, not just your qualifications, that will get you a board seat on a high-profile nonprofit or corporate board. And so I want to make sure I'm going to open up for questions for the next couple of minutes. But first, let me ask you: did this make sense to you? This is good because what I have found is that most people have never gotten a perspective like this before. We're often told, just join a nonprofit, just expand your network. But it's not just who you know, it's who knows you, but also how do you think strategically? Because as you continue to rise up the ladder, now you're going to be thinking, in fact, some of you that may be on an existing board may be rethinking, how long do I want to continue serving on that board before I'm ready to move up to some higher boards? Because as you're moving up, it's going to happen naturally. You're going to say, listen, I can't serve on this board anymore because I got to serve on this board. But I hope that this makes sense, because we want to make sure that as you reach that stage, that you're positioned to hopefully serve on a future corporate board, that this is going to be necessary. Just to give you some ideas so that you all can feel encouraged that, that not to be alarmed, that you're already on schedule. The average age to get on your first corporate board is 58, on average. The average age of all corporate board directors on Fortune 1000 companies is 61. But what's the common denominator? Why are they so old? Well, remember, I know, right? It sounds right. But if you think about it, 1, they achieved. 2, they were visible. And 3, at age 58, 61, you got a lot of time. And so when you take that quotient, so now you can see why that credibility becomes so important. It's not about your qualifications. Don't let anyone tell you that, in order to get on a board, you need skill set A and skill set B and skill set C. What they're saying is, it's not that they're completely wrong, it's that they want the wisdom of those skill sets. Because you can hire skill set. Remember, show me your qualifications, I'll show you a mid-level manager job. Show me your sponsorship, I'll show you the C-suite. Show me your credibility, and I'll show you a board seat, whether it's nonprofit or a for-profit. But in both cases, it's still the same concept. So now it gives you a chance, as you think about today and tomorrow, how can you think about your credibility so that you can think about all these other things that we're doing? And if we do that, I feel very confident that everybody here will be able to serve on some great boards and then over time serve on some corporate boards. So with that, let me open up for some questions. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Great talk. Question, you mentioned about moving from board to board.
Yes.
What's the effective exit strategy as you do this?
I love that question. The question is, what's your exit strategy when you're serving on a board? So the answer is that it depends on, is this a very local board or is this a board that's affiliated to a larger board? So let's just say, for example, what city do you live in, if I can ask?
Chicago.
You're in Chicago. Let's just say you decide to join the Chicago Urban League, or you join the Chicago Boys and Girls Club, or the Chicago United Way. It might be, by the way, those organizations are prominent in themselves. If you go to any one of those boards that I mentioned, you look at their board, they're heavy hitter board directors. But let's just say you're rising up and you're ready to go to the United Way USA or the Boys and Girls Club USA. It may be that that as you're being asked to rise up into these larger regional and national boards, you may say, I don't know that I can handle the time that it takes to commit to that local board. So you'll get a good idea. One question that that I often get is, how long should you serve on any board? Or can you do it for a year or 2 years? And the answer is, it's not going to work if you're only there for a year or 2 years. In fact, it won't work if you're there for 3 years. You really need to be at the bare minimum 3, 4, 5, 6 years on that board. And why? Because the time component, your achievements multiplied by time, multiplied by visibility equals credibility. If you're on that nonprofit for only 1 year, your time component doesn't move. So you can see the common denominator, but once you feel like that time component is really gotten you to that level of credibility, now you're ready to serve on that board and you'll get a good feel. Sometimes it might be 6 years. There are organizations that have term limits that may say 6 years. In fact, when I served on the Unidos US Board of Directors many years ago, they have a term limit of 6 years. And so you'll kind of know that. And so hopefully that gives you an idea that what that exit strategy is. But that's a great question to ask in terms of how long should I serve on the board before you're ready to step down?
Thank you.
All right, yes. Yes, sir. And we'll come over here in the back, yes. Yes, go ahead, yes, sir.
Thank you. Great presentation, by the way.
Thank you.
So we have been focusing internally, to grow our career. Most of us here, 50% of us pretty much are not really looking outside.
Right.
I'm one of them. So my question to you is, how do we start looking outside? Because basically, we have been told, okay, do your work, right? Do it well, and that will actually get you where you want to be. How do we change that? How do we start really looking outside and kind of looking at all these boards and all these activities? And I'm very proud of the 50% that are able to do that, because basically I don't even know how to start. Just being transparent with you.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad, by the way, give them applause for that transparency, because that's an honest conversation. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to make sure that this be the first session of the day before you get to these other sessions. Because for some of you, you may be looking at these corporate boards and saying, oh my God, I'm so far distant from a future corporate board because I've got to get on some prominent nonprofit boards. So a couple of things that you may want to think about. You may want to first start with, again, wherever you live regionally, I would start where you live regionally or where your company is based and look for those organizations. And by the way, they may not invite yourself on their board until they see you active. So maybe you might be volunteering for United Way. Almost every company supports the United Way. It's one of the ones that I just lean to because every company has a United Way activation. Or it might be, again, one of these other prominent organizations. And so you start there, and so you may want to start spending some time in volunteering. And some of them may be on the weekends. And then you start there, and maybe start with that first organization, and then eventually show your intent that you would love to serve on the board, and then you may even be able to look to see if there's anyone on the board who you may have a connection to. Now, one thing that's important to mention is that it's rare, it's very rare, that a non-for-profit will take 2 board directors from the same company. It's very, very rare. Most of the time, so you may want to look at the board of directors and make sure that there's no one from your company that is serving on that board, because that's an opportunity. But let's just say there is someone on that board from your company. You might want to ask them, hey, what's your exit strategy? When are you planning, are you planning on stepping off? And if you are planning on stepping off, can you nominate me to serve on that board? Because now there's already that company relationship that happens. But I would start locally and then serve on that and volunteer, get to know them, because remember that from the eyes of the nonprofit, they don't see your credibility yet. So you're going to have to build that credibility by getting involved and volunteering and finding that connection, and then eventually it will happen. Once you get on that board, then eventually your credibility component starts to grow, and then others will eventually be able to start noticing you. And then balancing that between your work duties as well as a nonprofit. But when you let your employer know that you're on a nonprofit, many companies actually give their employees time to serve on their board, so that way it's not considered extracurricular on top of the work that you do. But that's a great question. Great, thank you. Back there, and then we'll come back here. Yes.
Hi, I'm Indira Demorisi from PwC. Thank you for the presentation. I've been taking notes throughout.
Excellent.
One question. How do we find out who the members of the board are? Is that public information?
Yeah.
That's one. I have two questions. And then my second question is, what's the time commitment?
So, two very important questions. So let me go to the first one, which is the easiest. The answer is that's an easy yes. You want to join a non-for-profit, that's what's called a public non-for-profit. Even if you don't remember the words IRS Rule 501c3, if you serve on enough nonprofits, you're going to hear the word 501c3 all the time. That's just the requirement that companies, that nonprofits are required to publicly disclose their board of directors. So you can, but you don't even have to remember that. All you got to do is do a search of that non-for-profit, and every public non-for-profit is required to disclose their board of directors. So you can usually go to the website. If you go to About, and usually if you go to About, then you'll see leadership and then board of directors, and there is where you'll list it. But let's just say it's a non-for-profit that doesn't have a website. You can still get the list of the board of directors because they're required to disclose it on their IRS Form 990, which you don't have to remember what a 990 is, but for those that are nonprofits, you know what I'm talking about. But in other words, if you do a search, you can find it very easily. The second question is a much more subjective question in terms of what's the time commitment. The answer, it depends. If you're looking for a board that, again, is well-funded and widely accepted, that means that your board service is mostly on support, direction, and if you choose, maybe volunteering. If your board is what I call a very strong volunteering board because they're not well funded, then that might meet your passion, and I'll always tell anyone to follow their passion. But in terms of the strategy here, that may not help you because they're not well funded. And so you're looking for those key things: well funded and widely accepted. And then the time commitment will really depend. The average board meets about 3 to 4 times a year. They may ask you to serve on 1 or 2 committees that meet 3 or 4 times a year. And some of them will allow you to meet in person, or they may allow you to meet virtually, but it all depends. But these are the questions that you should be asking before you consider joining any nonprofit board. But those are the things that you do. I mean, on my Junior Achievement New Jersey board of directors, when I told them that I'm happy to join, but I travel around the country and I'm all over the place, they said our meetings are at 8 a.m. And I'm like, great, 8 a.m. As long as we can get the board meetings out of the way by like 10 or 11 o'clock a.m., I'm good. And some boards will do it in the evenings to cater to you because, remember, you're a volunteer. And so nonprofits will work closely to help make it as convenient for you as possible. But then make sure that you're also participating in whatever that nonprofit is doing. There's an old saying that if you want to get something done, find someone who's busy and ask them to do it. It's the same concept with board of directors. If you want to get a good board director, find someone who's really, really busy and ask them to serve on a board. You'll make time. Hopefully that helps. I had a question up here. Yes. Yes, microphones are coming up.
Good morning. I'm Jessica Robledo Garcia, North America Supply and Demand Senior Director for Procter & Gamble.
Yay.
And the question I have for you is, once I get in, I want to have a really good strategy to make the most of my time there. So are there any books or any resources that I can look to start getting some knowledge to get a good strategy?
That's a great question, because again, this is a session about how to be strategic about your choice of nonprofits. But once you get on there, if this is your first time serving on a non-for-profit, I highly encourage you to look at resources. And there are tons of resources. Board Effect, as I shared, is a very great resource. There are, in local cities, there are resources. You're going to want to know how Robert's Rules of Order works in terms of how the meeting structure works, understanding what is a typical structure of a board. Every board has an executive committee. The average board size for most nonprofits is about 17 board directors. Some are as low as 11. Some I've seen as high as 23. If you join a board and it's like 50 people, that's not a board, it's an assembly. So you know, you want to think about those kinds of boards, but that gives you an idea of some of the resources. But I definitely encourage you to consider those resources. When I first joined my first nonprofit, I was in my late 20s, and I didn't know the first thing about nonprofits, and I wish I did, because I didn't understand Robert's Rules of Order. I didn't understand how we file with the Secretary of State in each state, how you elect a chair, a vice chair, a secretary, a treasurer, how you have to produce minutes so that there is a recording of the meeting, which is public disclosure. All these things that come with the technicalities of serving on a board. So if this is going to be your first time, there are some great resources that are available to you that you can find. And of course, if you need more of that, contact our team, and we can make sure that we find some good resources to help you on just the technicalities of being a successful board director. Great. Let's see, I may have time for one more question. Right over here.
Good morning. My name is Stephanie.
Stephanie from?
From BASF.
Yes, okay.
I was wondering, I was recently approached by a corporate search agency, boards agency, and I was wondering, do you happen to know if there's many more, or what is a resource we can see these board positions are available for corporate or nonprofit?
Yeah, so the answer is this, is that search firms mostly focus on corporate boards or very, very prominent nonprofit boards. And I mean like the really heavy nonprofits that have hundreds of millions of dollars in budgets where they're looking for that one. But understand also, search firms on the corporate side only fill 1/3 of all corporate board seats. 2/3 of all board seats are filled by word of mouth. And that's why when you think about the strategy of how to think about your strategy to get on a future corporate board, while it's great when you get contacted by a search firm because they were representing that nonprofit or corporate that are looking for this. Again, it's very rare that a nonprofit will go to a search firm. They almost always go word of mouth because they're not for profit and they don't always have the same budget, or that may not be the best use of their budget for paying a search firm. It's very common for them to do that if you're doing a CEO search, for example, or another very high level, hard to fill position. But most of the time, it's word of mouth. But if you are contacted, then just the same process to know what you do before you get on the board. They should tell you which company or board it is, and then you should look at that board, see who else serves on that board, and then cross-check to see look at the bios. In this day and age, it's easier to look at people's backgrounds better than ever, because most people just publicly disclose on LinkedIn, I'm on this board, I'm on that board, I'm on this board. Heaven knows, if you go to my LinkedIn page, you'll see the whole list of all the boards that I've served on and others. But everybody does that. But you can do that and see the list of the boards, and then consider, is that board right for you? Is it one, is it well-funded? And two, is it widely accepted? Not one or the other, one and the other. And if that works, then that could be a good potential board seat for you. So that's what you want to look for if they are doing this for either a nonprofit or a corporate. Now, many of you who work in financial services may be required to tell your employers. And this is something that's very, very important. Like if you're a licensed professional at an investment firm or in the banking or insurance industries, you may be required to disclose your nonprofit board service. That's because make sure that there's no conflict of interest and to make sure that that those disclosures take place. But hopefully that that's helpful for you. All right. Unfortunately, I don't have any more time for questions. But again, I want to just say, I hope, again, was this helpful for you? Hopefully you've learned something that you've learned for the very first time. Great. So, I'll be around between today and tomorrow. So, other times you may have some slides, some questions I want to ask you on the side. But again, I want to say muchas gracias. Thank you very much. And I hope to see all of you serving on boards over the next year. With that, muchas gracias. Have a great day.